I understand President Ruto is the current chair of the East African Community Summit, having taken over from President Salva Mayardit Kir of South Sudan. So in that context, I understand that he is reacting properly and saying, these are member states, let's have an urgent meeting. But it beggars belief that you are calling the president of a former colonizer and a neo-colonizer to tell you how to run African affairs. But all these are out of what I call colonial hangover. African politicians still hold the view that they must be second-guessed and supported by presidents of former colonizers. We must decolonize our minds. You don't need Macron. You don't need any president to tell us in Africa how we can make our own peace. This is why they look down upon us.
Hello Internet, this is John and welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is on the escalating conflicts in DRC, or the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the rebels, that's M23, kind of has overpowered the government forces of DRC, and they managed to take over Goma, the eastern part of DRC, and people, especially civilians, are really suffering there. And the conflict kind of has been so complicated to an extent where the East African community leaders have not managed to resolve it, which makes it the purpose of African Union leadership to look like it's useless to some extent, because if you cannot resolve disputes within the territories in Africa, then what else? What's your role? What's your role as leadership of African Union? So because African leaders should be able to resolve disputes within the African borders. But now they have gone to an extent where they have to rely on external parties or third parties to help in resolving their own conflicts. So instead of advancing, we are taking several steps back in terms of growth or civilization or ways of advancing. So there's a case of President William Ruto, who I think is the one who has received the biggest blows from people who are unhappy from the fact that he is the chair of the East African Community Summit, which he should have taken the initiative to try and call the leadership of the neighboring countries, or maybe Uganda and Rwanda and DRC, because they're the ones who are mostly quoted or involved in that conflict. Although countries like Uganda and Rwanda have denied it. They have said that's an internal issue in DRC. So President Ruto is receiving the backlash because he's the chair of the EAC summit. So he should provide that leadership role in resolving the conflict. But then what did he do? He decided to post on his X page that he approached Emmanuel Macron, that he called Macron, and they spoke at length about how to solve the dispute in DRC, the eastern region of DRC. So people were very unhappy that every time there are disputes, these African leaders, instead of solving their issues, they have to run to external people or parties or colonial powers to resolve disputes in their countries. So people are not happy with that action, that you have to go all the way instead of calling local leaders or the leadership in Africa, come up with a meeting plan and talk about it, about the issue in DRC, involve the presidents of Rwanda and Uganda and DRC and other interested parties, and try and resolve the issue as your own. But now the fact that he went ahead to call Emmanuel Macron of France has really made people to be very disappointed with him, and many people have reacted to that, and especially on his ex post, because they are not happy about that, because people feel that France has been there all along. How come they have never managed to resolve the issue? So they are not new, that now they can come with new ideas and to resolve the issue. They have been there all along. So why didn't they solve it? Why didn't they solve it? So sometimes some of these things is upon the African states to resolve the issues internally by themselves. Otherwise, the population will suffer, which is the civilians. Some of the comments here from people who are disappointed is this one here from someone who said it's disappointing to see an African president discussing the affairs of an African country with a European leader. Shame on you and all those who claim to be Pan-Africanists. This is a disgrace to the continent, and the fact that you proudly posted about it is even more troubling. So people are not happy with President Ruto, for posting that he has spoken to President Macron of France about a dispute in the neighborhood in DRC. Another one says, how I pray and hope for the day when the 54 African leaders unite to solve the African problems without relying on the West or the East. We need leaders who have their nations and Africa at heart. Where is the African Union? The same thing I had said earlier. Is it just another useless organization? So you see the way people are not happy at all about that. Someone is telling President Ruto that calling President Museveni and President Kagame of Rwanda should have been more useful and helpful than calling Macron. Are you not the same person who told us how Africans should solve their problems? Which part of Africa is Macron from? So people are really disappointed with that move of involving Macron in solving the issue. Another one said, what is the purpose of AU? The African Union is a continental body that was proposed for the purpose of unity, cooperation, peace amongst African states. The idea of African Renaissance is unlikely until the overhanging weight of corruption is dealt with fairly and honestly. In my view, the AU has failed to deliver its mandate and it's not effective at all. So people are wondering, what's the purpose of African Union? We've seen what countries like organizations like European Union, the way they are so strong. When they speak, they speak. Look at the BRICS now, the way they are really trying to make sure they have a strong organization. So organizations with purpose, and they mean it. They mean what they say. But now here, African Union, they're just there. They're just there. Someone is saying, Your Excellency Dr. William Ruto, the war is in the DRC is purely an East African problem, EAC problem. President Macron cannot even solve his own country's problems. You want him to solve our problems. Please ask the president of the DRC and the M23 fighters to solve the problem on the negotiating table, not with guns. Many advisors there to President Ruto. This is not a problem of puppets. Why drag Macron into the Congo crisis? Speak for the people of Kenya. What's the best course of action? This is between Congo and Rwanda. I would appreciate more if you said you spoke to President Kagame. This is shameful. Where is the African identity in this? So President Ruto is really receiving a lot of backlash for that decision. Someone is saying France and their ilk are the source of problems in the Great Lakes. Glad the likes of Mali and Burkina Faso have asked them to close their military bases in their countries. Your Excellency, you should be making contacts with President Kagame, Tshisekedi, Museveni, and also President Ramaphosa, whose nationals are actively involved in Goma issue. Nationals here means the soldiers. They have sent the soldiers there to try and bring peace there. Someone here is saying, Mr. President, who the hell is Macron in the scheme of things in Goma and the greater DRC? We are not discussing ethnic and religious riots in Paris for heaven's sake, to consult President Macron. You see? So people are really agitated. They are really not happy. They are pissed off with that idea of involving external people or former colonial powers to resolve internal disputes between countries, because DRC is blaming Rwanda. Rwanda is saying they are innocent in that issue, and that the issue is that there are people of Rwandese who are Rwandese speaking people or Tutsi ethnicity, who are naturally citizens of Congo. Remember, of Congo, or the DRC for that matter, the eastern part of DRC. Remember, the artificial borders were done by foreign powers, the demarcations. So somehow, when those demarcations were done, people who were speaking, the Tutsi speaking people, or people with the Rwandese dialect, the same as the people in Rwanda, some of them remained in because of the demarcation. Some of them remained in Congo, DRC. Some are in Rwanda. So the civilians in eastern part of DRC feel like the majority or the government in Kinshasa doesn't recognize them, and they want them to move back to Rwanda, where the majority of their ethnic group belong or stay. Which is wrong, because Rwanda is not there. As much as they speak the same language to Rwandese people, they don't belong to Rwanda. They were born and they are native in Congo. They belong in Congo, which is a common thing in Africa. It's a common thing in Africa, where the artificial borders made a community to split into two. So you'll find a community in a border, some are in another country, and others in another country, and they speak the same language. They even relate. For example, in Kenya and Uganda, there's a time a brother was in leadership in Uganda, and the other brother was vice president in Kenya. Like top leadership brothers. One was in Uganda, one was in Kenya government, and they are brothers because of the artificial borders. So you'll find a community like Kuria, part of it is in Uganda, in Kenya, but part of it in Tanzania because of the artificial borders. So there is no way you can force a Kuria speaking person who lives in Kenya and tell them now go back to Tanzania because the majority of your ethnic group is in Tanzania. Likewise to the Tesos of Uganda or the Sapaot, where they are in Kenya and they are also in Uganda. And there are several examples of people like that. There is the case of Lesotho. I think it's Lesotho, where the same speaking ethnic group is in South Africa, others in Lesotho. So this idea of telling people go to Rwanda because you are born in because you speak the same language with the Rwandese, you are not Congolese, is what is fueling this conflict. And that's why President Ruto is receiving a lot of backlash because of involving external forces, yet it's something they can sit down with the leadership and solve it. And someone was even suggesting that President Macron was not the right person to approach. If really you needed someone who is external to help in resolving this issue, some people are suggesting President Trump or Erdogan, the president of Turkey, or Putin, president of Russia. They say those ones, at least they will mean something if they really want to help in solving the issue. So you can see that means people are really not comfortable with President Macron being involved in this issue. And I believe that even President Ruto should have just kept quiet about it. He should not have even talked about involving President Macron, and just try to solve this issue internally. So there's a lot of backlash, and people feel like this interference is somehow fueled by external forces, and there are some people who are benefiting from the resources in Congo, the huge resources in Congo. So whenever there is conflict, that's when now they can access the resources, the minerals, through unscrupulous means, because there is no order. People are fighting, and that's the time now minerals are being taken out of the country, because corruption and things like that will thrive when there is confusion. So some people also believe that this is fueled by external forces. There are external factors, external interferences in this. So going to external leaders to resolve it is not the right thing, because they could be the ones who are sponsoring the confusion. Because there is that belief that people don't want that area to have peace, because whenever there is peace, they'll not be able to access the minerals through black market, because the minerals accessed in black markets are cheap, very cheap. But if the place was organized and the DRC was intact and negotiate on for their minerals on a free and fair market, they would be a rich country. They would really grow and benefit its people. But the more there are confusion and fighting and all that, they lose their minerals, they lose their wealth. Other countries are benefiting from it. Remember the case of Niger, where the minerals there, what's the name of that mineral in Niger? The one which was being sold cheaply. It was being sold cheaply to France because of a very old agreement which was very unfair to Niger, where the mineral was being used to power the nuclear generators in France, where it produces power in excess to an extent that France are able to sell to other countries. And yet the same Niger lives in darkness. It's a very big irony of life and an unfair way of treating other human beings. You take their resources, you go and utilize it to get power, to generate your own power to an extent where you have excess, you have surplus to sell. But the same country where you're extorting the uranium, the mineral, do not have power or enough power. That's a very weird way of relating with people. All right, guys, we'll listen a little bit about on the same issue from Professor PLO Lumumba. He talked about it a little bit, and then I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Then we begin to say that some are Congolese, some are Rwandese, some are Burundians. I hope and pray that those who for the time being are in positions of leadership in the DRC will recognize and see the big picture and negotiate. The stance that they have taken, that they are not going to negotiate with M23, is in my view self-defeating.